At 6:40 a.m., Manhattan looked clean enough to forgive people. The glass towers wore the sunrise like a suit. The sidewalks steamed. The city moved with the calm arrogance of money. And I was early, like I always was. I let myself into Brightline Ledger with a badge that still worked, a smile that didn't. The lobby smelled like lemon polish and ambition. Two security guards nodded at me, the way you nod at a woman you assume is harmless. A woman who always holds the door. A woman who always remembers birthdays. A woman who never raises her voice. They didn't know the difference between harmless and disciplined. I rode the elevator up to the 27th floor with a paper cup of coffee I didn't need. Because I wasn't there for caffeine. I was there for confirmation. When the doors opened, the office was still half asleep. A few monitors glowed in the dark like aquarium glass. The cleaning crew rolled quiet carts down the hall. Somewhere, a printer coughed out a document nobody would own. I walked past the wall of framed magazine covers, our CEO smiling like he invented gravity, past the values poster that said, integrity in letters too large to be believable. Then I turned into the conference wing. And stopped. Because the new banner was already up. Not the old one with our internal slogan. Not the one I designed during a 48-hour crisis when our payment system nearly collapsed and I slept in a hoodie under my desk. This banner was glossy. Fresh. Unwrinkled. It read, Brightline Ledger. Investor Day. Operational Excellence Presentation. Presented by Hunter Klein. Hunter Klein. My name wasn't on it. Not below. Not in small print. Not hidden in the corners, like an apology. Just gone. I stared at the banner like it was a stranger wearing my clothes. Hunter Klein, my director, was the kind of man who spoke in summaries of other people's work. He loved phrases like high-level vision and big-picture leadership, the way some people love whiskey, as proof they were adults. For months, Investor Day had been mine. The deck, the narrative, the metrics, the contingencies. Hunter was supposed to introduce me. Then sit down. That was the promise. That was the lie. At 6:44 a.m., my phone buzzed. A calendar update. Investor Day final run-through. Time. 8 a.m. Organizer. Hunter Klein. Note. Nora removed. I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. I felt something inside me go very still. Because now, I had two choices. I could confront him, or I could let him finish building the stage on stolen ground. I chose the second. At 7:12 a.m., I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Receipts. 3 weeks earlier, Brightline Ledger still called me essential. Not in writing. In writing, they called me support. But in the way deadlines stopped breaking when I entered a room people knew. At 9:10 p.m., the executive floor looked like a museum after hours. Everything expensive. Everything silent. Everything pretending no one bled for the numbers on the wall. I was alone in conference room B with a laptop, 2 legal pads, and a protein bar I kept forgetting to eat. Slide 12 was open. The dangerous slide. The slide where fantasy ends. Brightline was fast. But speed is not stability. And stability is what investors buy when founders stop being charming. I had built a system no one celebrated. Incident escalations. On-call rotations. Root cause templates. A quiet machine. The first time Brightline crashed, leadership panicked. People shouted in Slack. Executives demanded answers from the wrong people. Engineers worked miracles, while management rehearsed excuses. Afterward, Hunter said, "We need more discipline." Like discipline arrives by email. I was the one who built it. That was why the COO trusted me. That was why Hunter feared me. At 9:23 p.m., an email arrived. From Mila Hart, COO. Subject: Investor Day Operational Segment. Nora, join the leadership run-through on Friday. Hunter will present. I want you ensuring we're defensible. Defensible. That word mattered. Because this wasn't a presentation. It was an interrogation with money attached. I opened the incident logs. Not summaries. Raw timelines. Timestamps. One incident made my chest tighten every time. Not catastrophic. Repeatable. A failure pattern that could return if leadership chose optics over safety. I had flagged it twice. Hunter dismissed it twice. We can't lead with problems, he said. We need momentum. Momentum is what people say when they don't control systems. At 10:32 p.m., Footsteps stopped outside the door. Hunter didn't knock. He leaned in, like the room belonged to him. "You're still here," he said, smiling. "I'm finishing," I replied. His eyes flicked to my screen. "You know Investor Day is about presents," he said. "Delivery moves money." Silence made him continue. "I'll handle the stage," he said. "You handle the substance." There it was. Face versus engine. I nodded. Not agreement. Timing. After he left, I opened a new document. I titled it, "If They Try to Erase Me." Line 1. Preserve timestamps. At 11:08 p.m., I saved it. I created a private folder. Legal boundaries intact. Receipts preserved. Because if Hunter wanted the spotlight, he was also volunteering to be visible when it collapsed. The run-through was scheduled for 4 p.m. By 3:47 p.m., the room was already full. That told me everything. When leadership arrives early, it means decisions have already been made somewhere else. The main auditorium felt smaller without investors, less theatrical. This was where lies learned to sound confident. Hunter stood near the stage, jacket off, sleeves rolled just enough to look approachable. The kind of costume men wear when they want credit for effort without showing sweat. Mila Hart, our COO, sat in the third row with a legal pad on her knee. She wrote nothing. That worried me more than if she'd been scribbling. Legal sat together. Two people, quiet, alert, like doctors waiting for a patient to say the wrong thing. I took a seat near the aisle. Not the front. Not the back. Close enough to be seen. Far enough to observe. Hunter clapped his hands once. "All right," he said. "Let's do a clean run. Timing matters. Energy matters. Remember, this is about confidence." Confidence again. He nodded to the AV team. The lights dimmed. Slide 1 appeared. He started strong. Too strong. The opening was smooth. Polished. He used my framing, my cadence, my setup, but his voice wrapped around it differently. Where I built inevitability. The room nodded along. I watched faces. Executives respond to comfort the way children respond to lullabies. Slide 3. Slide 4. Metrics. Here it came. Hunter read the headline and spoke faster than before, trying to outrun the content. "As you can see, our operational efficiency has increased significantly, driven by leadership alignment and cross-functional accountability." Leadership alignment. That was new. I glanced at Mila. She looked up, not impressed, not alarmed, just measuring. Hunter clicked forward. He skipped a slide. Not accidentally, intentionally. Slide 6. My risk disclosure flashed for half a second before disappearing. I felt something tighten in my jaw. That slide wasn't optional. It was the difference between honesty and exposure. Hunter kept going. He was now telling a story where operations were seamless, frictionless, solved. A fairy tale with servers. Then came the Q&A practice. Investor relations stood up to play the part of curious capital. A man with a polite smile asked the first question. "Can you speak to incident frequency year over year?" Hunter smiled back. "Absolutely. We've seen a meaningful reduction in reportable incidents." Reportable. That word did a lot of work. I raised my hand. Hunter hesitated just a fraction, then nodded, like he was granting me charity. "Yes, Norda?" I stood. I didn't smile. "When we say reportable," I said calmly, "we should clarify that the definition changed in Q3. Otherwise, year-over-year comparisons could be misleading." The room shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. Hunter chuckled. "Great point," he said quickly. "But we don't want to get lost in technical nuance. Investors care about outcomes. Outcomes. Always outcomes." Legal's head snapped up. Just a little. I saw it. Mila saw it too. She looked at Legal. Legal looked back. That was the first crack. The rehearsal continued. Each time nuance threatened the narrative, Hunter smoothed it over. Each time reality tried to surface, he called it distraction. And each time, someone from Legal adjusted in their chair like a muscle tensing. At 4:42 p.m., Hunter reached the final section. The one about resilience. My section. The one built on a promise. "We fail cleanly, visibly, and recover fast." Hunter changed the wording. Not much. Just enough. He removed the word fail. He replaced it with experience variability. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Not anger. Recognition. Because this wasn't just about credit anymore. This was about denial. And denial is expensive. The run-through ended at 4:55 p.m. Polita applause. Hunter beamed. Strong, he said. Really strong. Investor Day is going to be great. Mila closed her notebook. Still empty. She stood. Everyone else thank you, she said. Hunter, legal. Nora, stay back. The room emptied fast. Too fast. Hunter's smile stayed in place, but his shoulders stiffened. Legal didn't sit. They stood near the aisle like referees. Mila turned to Hunter. We need to talk about definitions, she said. Hunter laughed lightly. Sure. But I think we're aligned on messaging. We are not, Mila said. Silence fell. Not awkward. Serious. She turned to me. Nora, she said, walk us through the incident classification change. Briefly. That was permission. I didn't look at Hunter. I spoke to Mila. In Q3, incidents below a certain transaction threshold were reclassified as service blips, I said. They no longer counted toward reported incident frequency. The response process stayed the same. The optics changed. Legal nodded. Hunter cut in. That was a strategic reframing, he said. Not a concealment. Legal finally spoke. Was investor relations informed that year-over-year metrics reflect a definition change? Hunter paused. Too long. Mila didn't look away. No, Hunter said finally. But it's immaterial. Legal exchanged a glance. Immaterial. That word makes lawyers sweat. Mila exhaled slowly. We're not removing the risk slide, she said. And we're not avoiding timestamps if asked. Hunter's jaw tightened. With respect, he said, that undermines the story. Mila's voice stayed level. It protects the company. She turned to Legal. Thoughts? Legal didn't hesitate. If an investor asks for specifics and we deflect, it raises red flags, one of them said. Transparency is safer. Safar. Hunter looked at me then. Not with calculation. With something closer to resentment. As if I'd betrayed him by existing. Mila followed his gaze. Nora built the operational framework, she said. She'll be in the room on Investor Day. Hunter blinked. Just once. But, he started. She won't present, Mila continued. But she'll be there. And if a technical question comes up, she answers it. There it was. A compromise that wasn't won. Visibility without credit. Responsibility without authority. Hunter forced a smile. Of course, he said. Team effort. Team effort. The meeting broke. Hunter walked out without looking at me. Legal left quietly. Mila lingered. She waited until we were alone. Then she said something unexpected. Be careful, she said softly. With what? I asked. With being right, she replied. I watched her go. And for the first time since the banner appeared, I felt uneasy. Not because I was losing, because I was beginning to understand how far Hunter was willing to go. At 5:21 p.m., back at my desk, I opened my private folder. Receipts. I added a new subfolder. I named it Definition Changes. Then I added another. Legal Awareness Timeline. Because the story Hunter was telling wasn't just incomplete. It was brittle. And brittle stories shatter when pressure arrives at the exact right moment. At 8:46 p.m., the office felt borrowed. Not abandoned. Borrowed. The kind of quiet that doesn't belong to anyone who works there anymore. Most floors were dark. A few lights burned stubbornly behind glass, like people pretending productivity was still happening. I was back at my desk. Shoes off. Jacket folded. Hair tied without ceremony. This was not overtime. This was reconnaissance. My inbox refreshed. Nothing. That was unusual. Hunter liked control. But he loved documentation. Silence meant something was moving without leaving fingerprints. At 8:52 p.m., my badge stopped working on the data floor. I tested it twice. Red light. Denied. I stared at the reader like it had personally insulted me. The data floor housed live dashboards, incident streams, and the mirrored logs investor relations sometimes pulled from during meetings. Cutting access the night before Investor Day was not operational hygiene. It was strategy. I didn't call IT. Calling IT creates records. Instead, I opened Slack, typed carefully. deleted, typed again, then stopped. Because before I could decide how to respond, an email arrived. From legal. Timestamp. Voot. Subject. Clarification request incident definitions. My chest tightened. Legal doesn't email casually. I opened it. Nora. We're reviewing materials ahead of Investor Day. Can you confirm when the incident classification thresholds were approved? And by whom? Also, were any objections formally recorded? A. No emojis. No soft language. This wasn't curiosity. This was containment. I checked the CC line. Mila wasn't included. Hunter wasn't either. Legal was triangulating. Quietly. At 9:01 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text. From Hunter. Quick heads up. Some access changes tonight. Don't panic. Investor Day hygiene. Investor Day hygiene. That phrase made my stomach settle into something cold and steady. Because hygiene is what people claim when they're cleaning blood. I didn't reply. I opened receipts. Inside, the folders sat like a map of pressure points. Definition changes. Legal awareness timeline. Incident logs original. I added a new one. Access modifications pre-Investor Day. Because timing is not intent, but patterns are. At 9:08 p.m., I forwarded legal's email to my private notes system. Then, I pulled up the approval chain. The incident definition change had 3 signatures. Operations. Compliance. Executive. The executive approval wasn't Hunter. It was the CEO, and the timestamp was telling. Approved at 11:14 p.m. on a Sunday, during a reported systems maintenance window. No discussion. No meeting notes. No objections recorded. Except one. Mine. I opened the email thread. There it was. My response. Timestamped. Polita. Clear. Documented. This reclassification improves optics, but does not reduce risk. If presented externally, we should disclose the definition change. Hunter had replied 37 minutes later. Noted. We'll handle narrative alignment. Narrative alignment. I exhaled slowly. At 9:17 p.m., I realized the shape of the trap. If Investor Day went smoothly, Hunter would be rewarded. If an investor asked the wrong question and he deflected, legal would scramble. And if legal traced the decision chain, the spotlight wouldn't land on Hunter first. It would land on the woman who warned them. Because warning without escalation is not protection. It's participation. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. This was the moment people like me are taught to disappear. To say, I tried. To protect careers instead of companies. At 9:24 p.m., my phone rang. Mila. I answered. I know, she said before I could speak. Know what? I asked. That you lost access, she replied. And that legal is circling. I didn't pretend. Yes. She paused. Then, are you clean? The question wasn't personal. It was professional. Yes, I said. I documented objections. I didn't escalate beyond protocol. Another pause. Longer. That might not be enough, she said. I know. Silence stretched between us. Then, she said something that surprised me. If an investor asks about timelines tomorrow, I might look at you. I pictured the room. The lights. The stage. Hunter, holding the mic. Mila in the third row. Legal waiting to breathe. If you look at me, I said, I'll answer. She didn't say thank you. She said, be precise. The call ended. At 9:41 p.m., I packed my bag. Not hurried. Not emotional. I turned off my monitor. Left my desk clean. People assume revenge looks like anger. It doesn't. It looks like preparation. In the elevator, my reflection stared back at me. Tired. Focused. Unapologetic. At 9:58 p.m., I stepped out onto the street. The city didn't care. Taxis honked. People laughed. Somewhere, a deal closed. Somewhere else, a career ended without knowing it yet. Tomorrow, Hunter would stand on a stage built from borrowed truth. Tomorrow, an investor would ask about timestamps. And tomorrow, I would decide whether silence was loyalty or complicity. I walked home without music, because this was not a night for distraction. This was the night before gravity remembers who built the floor. At 7:58 a.m., The auditorium lights were already on. Too bright. Investor Day always pretended to wake up early, like discipline was part of the brand. Rows of chairs filled slowly with tailored confidence. Expensive shoes, neutral expressions, the quiet rustle of money deciding where to feel safe next. I took my seat near the aisle. Same place as the rehearsal. Close enough to be seen. Far enough to survive. Hunter was backstage, pacing with a headset clipped to his ear. His energy was sharp, focused, hungry. He looked like a man who believed today would change his life. At 8 a.m., the room settled. The CEO walked on stage first. Smiles, gratitude, vision. Applause arrived on time. Then Hunter. He stepped into the light, like he belonged there. "Good morning," he said. "Thank you for being here. Today, I want to talk about operational excellence." The words landed clean. He had practiced. Slide 1. Slide 2. The story flowed. For the first 5 minutes, nothing went wrong. That was the danger. Confidence spreads faster than truth. Hunter moved through the deck with ease. He hit the growth numbers, the efficiency gains, the resilience narrative. He avoided one slide, exactly as rehearsed. At 8:17 a.m., he reached the metrics section. The room leaned forward. Numbers invite judgment. Hunter spoke with certainty. "Our incident response times have improved significantly," he said. "We've built systems that allow us to detect, escalate, and resolve issues faster than ever." Faster than ever. That phrase earned nods. Then came the pause. The one that never shows up on agendas. A hand went up. Not hesitant. Not polite. The same investor from the rehearsal. Gray blazer, still eyes. She didn't wait to be acknowledged. "Can you share the timeline of your last major incident?" she asked. "Detection, escalation, mitigation, and resolution." With timestamps. The room froze. Not audibly. Physically. Hunter smiled. "The practiced one. We focus on continuous improvement rather than—" The investor interrupted him. I asked for timestamps. Silence snapped into place. You could hear air conditioning. Legal leaned forward. Investor relations stopped breathing. Mila sat in the third row. She didn't look at Hunter. She looked at me. At 8:19 a.m., the entire room shifted. Hunter followed her gaze. For half a second, his face betrayed him. Not fear. Calculation. Then he said, "Nora Winslow leads our operational frameworks." "Nora?" He handed me the microphone like it was an olive branch, like it was generosity. I stood. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. I took the mic with both hands and felt how light it was. Lighter than truth. "Heads up," I said calmly. "Before I answer, I want to clarify one thing." Every eye locked in. "The incident classification threshold changed in Q3, I continued. "So I'll reference the original logs for accuracy." Hunter stiffened. Legal exhaled. The investor nodded once. "Permission granted." I spoke. At 2:14 a.m., the anomaly was detected by automated monitoring. I paused. Let the room adjust. At 2:19 a.m., it was escalated to on-call engineering. I clicked to the backup slide. Hunter hadn't known it existed. At 2:27 a.m., mitigation began. The room leaned in. At 2:46 a.m., services stabilized. I stopped. I didn't embellish. I didn't defend. I just told time the way time happened. Then I added one sentence. "The reclassification did not change response speed," I said. "It changed reporting optics." Silence. Pure. Unforgiving. At 8:22 a.m., the investor spoke again. "Thank you," she said. "That's all I needed." "That's all." Hunter swallowed. The CEO shifted in his chair. Legal scribbled. The room didn't applaud. They recalibrated. Because money doesn't clap. It recalculates. Hunter took the mic back. His voice was still steady, but his myth had cracked. "Transparency is important to us," he said. "And we're committed to." He sounded smaller now. At 8:31 a.m., the session ended. Polita applause. Controlled exits. Conversations whispered instead of declared. People avoided Hunter's eyes. I sat back down. Heart steady. Breathing normal. Because the moment had passed. And moments like that don't explode. They spread. At 10:06 a.m., my calendar updated without a sound. Touchpoint executive review. Location: CEO office. Time: 10:30 a.m. Attendees: CEO, legal, COO, organizer, executive office. Hunter wasn't on the list. That mattered. Executive meetings don't exclude people by accident. They exclude them to measure absence. I closed my laptop and stood. Around me, the office had shifted its posture. Not dramatic. Subtle. Conversations lowered when I passed. Eyes followed, then looked away. After Investor Day, everyone pretends nothing happened. Until they don't. At 10:29 a.m., I stopped outside the CEO's office. Glass walls, frosted edges, a door designed to make power look transparent. I knocked once. "Come in," the CEO said. The room smelled like espresso and expensive restraint. The CEO sat at the head of the table, jacket still on, posture unchanged from the stage. Mila sat to his right. Legal sat across from her. No empty chairs. No room for spectators. I took the seat nearest the door. Not defensive. Strategic. At 10:31 a.m., the CEO spoke. "Thank you for being precise this morning," he said. "Not brave. Not helpful. Precise." That word was chosen carefully. "I answered the question," I said. "Yes," he replied. "You did." Legal opened a folder. Not thick. Focused. "We're conducting a post-event review," Legal said. "Not an investigation. A review." That distinction was for my benefit. I nodded. Mila watched me closely. "Not judging. Assessing." At 8:19 a.m., Legal continued. "You disclosed the incident timeline using original classification criteria." "Yes." "Was that coordinated with leadership?" "No." The CEO leaned back. "Why not?" I met his eyes. "Because the question asked for timestamps," I said. "And the original logs are the only accurate source." Silence. The CEO nodded once. "That answer," he said, "is either very dangerous or very valuable." "Which one?" I asked. "That depends on what comes next," he replied. Legal slid a document across the table. The approval chain. The Sunday timestamp. 11,004 p.m. "You objected to the reclassification," Legal said. "In writing." "Yes." "And you did not escalate beyond protocol." "No." Mila exhaled softly. The CEO tapped the table once. "Why not?" he asked. This time, the question wasn't legal. It was personal. "Because escalation without sponsorship ends careers," I said. And I believed leadership would disclose appropriately. The room absorbed that. No one rushed to correct me. At 10:39 a.m., the CEO spoke again. "Hunter believes you undermined him." I didn't react. "I didn't speak about Hunter," I said. "I spoke about time." Mila looked at the CEO. "That's true," she said. She answered exactly what was asked. Legal nodded. The CEO considered something invisible. "Investor Relations has received 3 follow-up emails," he said. "All asking about incident transparency." That was the ripple. Not applause. Pressure. At 10:44 a.m., the CEO stood. The meeting shifted with him. "We need to decide what problem we're solving," he said. "A people problem, or a trust problem." He looked at me. "Do you want Hunter's job?" The question landed hard. Direct. Dangerous. I answered without hesitation. "No." Mila's eyes flicked to me. Legal raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" the CEO asked. "Because this isn't about hierarchy," I said. "It's about whether the company can tell the truth when it matters." Silence. Clean. Undeniable. At 10:47 a.m., the CEO nodded slowly. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "Effective immediately, Legal will conduct a formal review of metric disclosures." Legal nodded. "Operations definitions will be standardized and frozen," he continued. "Any changes require written executive approval with external disclosure notes." Mila smiled faintly. "And," the CEO added, "investor-facing technical questions will route through operations." He looked at me. Hunter's name still hadn't been spoken, which meant his fate was undecided. Or, already sealed. The CEO sat back down. "This conversation doesn't leave this room," he said. "But understand something, Nora." I waited. "You stood up in front of money and told time the truth," he said. "That makes you dangerous." I didn't flinch. I understand, I said. At 10:52 a.m., the meeting ended. No handshakes. No congratulations. Just alignment. I stepped back into the hallway. The office noise rushed in like water. Slack messages lit up. Calendar invites reshuffled. Somewhere, Hunter was finding out that silence is not protection. It's distance. At 11:03 a.m., I sat at my desk and opened receipts. I didn't add anything. I didn't need to. Because the story had moved beyond proof. Now it was about consequences. And consequences take time. At 1:12 p.m., the Slack channel went quiet. Not silent. Quiet. The kind of quiet that means people are reading the same message and pretending they aren't. I felt it before I saw it. The subtle pause in typing. The delay in reactions. The way systems hesitate when humans interfere. Then my phone buzzed. A calendar update. Operations sync revised. Time. 2 p.m. Organizer. Hunter Klein. Attendees. Operations leadership. My name wasn't there. Again. This time, it wasn't subtle. It was surgical. At 1:18 p.m., I checked access. My permissions still existed. But the routing had changed. Incident escalations that used to pass through my queue now bypassed it. Not deleted. Redirected. Hunter wasn't attacking me directly. He was starving my relevance. That's how retaliation looks when people are afraid of paper trails. At 1:27 p.m., an alert fired. Minor. Low priority. A latency spike in a secondary processing cluster. The kind of thing junior engineers handle before it becomes a headline. I waited. No escalation. At 1:34 p.m., the spike doubled. Still no page. At 1:41 p.m., customer support tickets began to cluster. Payments delayed. Not failed. Delayed. The worst kind. Because delay erodes trust quietly. I stood. Walked to the data floor. Badge worked. The dashboards told a story nobody wanted to read. A dependency had been throttled. Not broken. Throttled. A temporary configuration change. Approved earlier that morning. I checked the changelog. Authorized by H. Klein. Timestamp. Do. 58 m. After the executive meeting. After legal spoke. After investor day. Recalibrated power. This wasn't incompetence. This was provocation. At 1:49 p.m., the first internal message went out. From Hunter. Seeing minor latency fluctuations. Team is on it. No need to escalate. No need to escalate. That phrase again? I forwarded the log snapshot to my private notes. Not receipts. Not yet. Because escalation is not impulse. It's timing. At 1:56 p.m., the spike crossed the threshold. Automatic escalation should have triggered. It didn't. Because the routing had changed. Because my name had been removed. I watched the clock. Watched the graphs. Watched the lie try to survive reality. At 2:03 p.m., the first external complaint reached investor relations. I knew because the channel lit up like a flare. Questions. Screenshots. Concern dressed as curiosity. Hunter's message followed immediately. False alarm? Resolved. It wasn't. The throttle was still in place. The delay was compounding. I took a breath. One. Then another. This was the moment. Not dramatic. Decisive. At 2:07 p.m., I sent one message. Not to Slack. Not to email. Direct. To Mila. Latency issue escalating. Approval log shows intentional throttle at 10:58 a.m. Routing bypassed ops escalation. This is not resolved. I attached evidence. 3 screenshots. 1 timestamp. No adjectives. At 2:11 p.m., Mila replied. On my way. 4 minutes later, legal joined the channel. At 2:16 p.m., the CEO's assistant blocked time. Urgent operations. Time. 2:30 p.m. Hunter's messages stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. That's when you know control has left the building. At 2:21 p.m., the throttle was removed. Latency began to normalize. Too late to pretend nothing happened. Too early to know who would pay. I sat back down. Heart steady. Hands calm. Because retaliation always exposes more than it conceals. And Hunter had just done something worse than lie. He had created a problem to prove he was needed. At 2:38 p.m., the CEO's office door closed again. This time, Hunter went in first. I wasn't invited. I wasn't excluded. I was irrelevant to the confrontation, which meant the confrontation wasn't about me anymore. At 3:02 p.m., legal requested full access logs for the last 24 hours. At 3:14 p.m., compliance flagged a pattern of discretionary system changes. At 3:26 p.m., HR blocked Hunter's calendar for the rest of the day. People noticed. They always do. At 3:41 p.m., my calendar changed. Operations Authority. Interim. Effective. Immediately. No announcement. No email blast. Just a quiet correction. By 4:05 p.m., the office had learned a new posture. People stopped whispering. They started asking. Not for permission. For clarity. I answered. Cleanly. Without commentary. Because power doesn't explain itself when it arrives through necessity. At 4:22 p.m., I opened receipts. I added one folder. Retaliation documented. Inside, I placed the throttle approval, the routing change, the timestamps. I didn't smile. I didn't feel victory. I felt alignment. Because Hunter thought retaliation was noise. He didn't understand systems. Systems remember. And now the system remembered him. At 8:14 a.m., the office arrived quieter than usual. Not tense. Resolved. The kind of calm that follows decisions made behind closed doors. Hunter's desk was empty. Not cleared. Just paused. His jacket still hung on the chair. His notebook lay open, pen resting where confidence used to live. HR hadn't announced anything. They never do at first. At 8:22 a.m., legal sent a meeting invite. Historical Review Operations Leadership. Time, 9 a.m. Attendees. Legal, Compliance, COO, CEO, Nora Winslow. Hunter wasn't listed. Again. Patterns don't accuse people. They explain them. At 9:01 a.m., the CEO closed the door. No small talk. No coffee. Legal projected a screen onto the glass wall. A timeline. Not just hours. 3 companies. 5 years. Same shape. Different logos. A director who arrived during growth. A shift in reporting definitions. A. Temporary configuration change before a key presentation. An incident. A deflection. A quiet exit. Legal didn't narrate. They didn't have to. At 9:07 a.m., compliance spoke. We requested references from Hunter's previous firms, she said. Not the ones he provided. The ones who replaced him. Replaced. Not promoted. The CEO leaned forward. Why didn't this surface earlier? He asked. Compliance answered without apology. Because the behavior was defensible in isolation, only visible in sequence. Sequence. That word mattered, because sequence is how truth hides in plain sight. At 9:12 a.m., Mila turned to me. You flagged similar risks, she said. Not the pattern, the mechanics. Yes, I replied. I didn't have the other data points. Legal nodded. And you didn't speculate, they said. You documented. That was the difference. Speculation ruins credibility. Documentation builds it. At 9:18 a.m., the CEO stood. Hunter will not return, he said. No drama. No justification. Just outcome. HR will handle separation, he continued. Legal will notify the board. He looked at me. Do you want to make a statement? I shook my head. No, I said. The system already did. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Final. At 9:26 a.m., the meeting ended. No congratulations. No applause. Because this wasn't a win. It was a correction. By 10:03 a.m., the office knew. Not officially, but professionally. People don't need emails to sense gravity. They feel it when a name stops appearing on calendars. When access quietly expires. When authority reroutes. At 10:41 a.m., an internal memo went out. Subject. Leadership Update Operations. Short. Neutral. Hunter's name appeared once. In the past tense. At 11:08 a.m., I walked past the framed integrity poster again. It looked smaller now. Less aspirational. More instructional. At 11:32 a.m., I received a message. From an unknown number. No greeting. Just a sentence. You didn't have to do that. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Because the truth doesn't argue with consequences. At 12:04 p.m., I updated one document. Not recipes, a different file. A living one. Operations principles. I added a line. Never optimize for optics at the cost of traceability. I saved it. Because patterns don't disappear. They get interrupted. At 2:18 p.m., my calendar changed again. Not a meeting. A placeholder. Discussion. Location. Executive floor. Time. 3 p.m. Attendees. CEO. New agenda. New context. Offers never announce themselves. They test posture first. I didn't prepare slides. I didn't rehearse answers. Because real offers aren't negotiated. They're revealed. At 2:57 p.m., I stepped off the elevator. The executive floor felt different now. Not louder. Cleaner. As if something toxic had been removed and the building was relearning how to breathe. The CEO's door was open. He waved me in without standing. That meant this wasn't ceremonial. This was practical. At 3:01 p.m., he spoke. You stabilized operations, he said. You protected investor trust. And you did it without asking for authority. I waited. Compliments are prefaces, not conclusions. We need someone to own operational truth, he continued. Across teams. Across narratives. He leaned back. Head of Operational Integrity. The title landed quietly. Too quietly. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't Hunter's job with a better name. It was a role designed to prevent people like Hunter. You'd report directly to me, he said. Dotted line to legal. Final say on definitions, disclosures, and escalation paths. Final say. Power disguised as responsibility. At 3:05 p.m., he added, the board will be briefed. I need to know your answer before then. Before, not after. That was the real test. I asked one question. What happens when this role contradicts growth? He didn't answer immediately. Good. When it does, he said, you document it. You escalate it. And if we ignore you, you leave with your name clean. Clean. That word mattered more than salary. More than title. At 3:08 p.m., I nodded once. I'll take the role, I said. On one condition. He smiled slightly. Of course. It has to be boring, I said. No stage, no announcements, no personal brand. He laughed quietly. That's why I'm offering it to you. At 3:12 p.m., we stood. No handshake, just alignment. As I turned to leave, he said something I didn't expect. Hunter called this morning. I stopped. He wanted to explain, the CEO said. I didn't take the call. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. At 3:19 p.m., I returned to my desk. Nothing had changed. And everything had. People still typed. Systems still hummed. But somewhere in the architecture of the company, a quiet line had been drawn. Truth would no longer need permission. At 3:44 p.m., I updated operations principles again. I added one sentence. Integrity scales slower than ambition, but it outlives it. I saved the file. Because offers are not rewards. They are responsibilities disguised as trust. And trust is only useful when it's tested. 3 months later, the office no longer talked about Hunter. Not because he was forgiven, because systems don't gossip. They replace. At 7:11 a.m., I unlocked the building with a badge that never failed anymore. Not because it couldn't, because it wouldn't. The lights came on in sequence. The dashboards woke up. The city outside moved like it always had, fast, indifferent, convinced it would outlive us all. My role didn't come with a stage. No town hall. No email blast. But things changed. Definitions stopped drifting. Approvals left trails. Escalations followed rules instead of relationships. At 9:34 a.m., an email arrived from a company I didn't recognize. Subject: Advisory request. We're facing an incident disclosure question ahead of a capital event. Your name was recommended by legal. Confidential. I didn't open it right away. Because the question wasn't whether I could help. It was whether helping would change anything. At 10:02 a.m., I walked into the operations review. The room was full. Not performative. Prepared. People spoke carefully now. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. Someone asked, Do we disclose this? Someone else asked, do we have timestamps? Those questions used to be dangerous. Now they were normal. At 11:18 a.m., legal joined and said something I'd never heard before. We recommend transparency. No qualifiers. No footnotes. Just truth. At 12:07 p.m., I replied to the advisory email. One question, I wrote. Do you want to fix the system or survive the meeting? The response came quickly. Too quickly. We need to get through the meeting. I closed the email. Because systems don't get fixed by people who only care about the next hour. At 2:46 p.m., I updated operations principles one last time. I added a final line. Silence is a choice. Systems remember who made it. At 4:12 p.m., I left the office. Not late. Not early. Balanced. The city outside didn't know what had changed. But companies felt it. Somewhere, a leader paused before changing a definition. Somewhere else, a manager hesitated before hiding a timestamp. Not because of me, because the system had learned. At 6:03 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I heard you're the reason things didn't fall apart. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. Then I put the phone away. Because credit is loud. And prevention is quiet. At 9:41 p.m., at home, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window. The city lights blinked like data points. Each one a decision. Each one a story. People think revenge is about destruction. It isn't. It's about removing the conditions that made betrayal profitable. And the truth is, most people don't remember who shouted. They remember what worked. They remember what didn't break. They remember what stayed standing when money leaned forward and asked for proof. At 11 p.m., I turned off the lights. Tomorrow, someone else would test the system. And if it held, no one would know my name. That was the point.